Yo book nerds, today we are going to talk about People Kill People by Ellen Hopkins. I read this book back in 2023. This was the last book I had finished in 2023, but I'm just getting to the review right now, so I apologize for the delay. But here it is, as promised. So I love Ellen Hopkins. I read a lot of her books. She's pretty much an instant buy for me when I see a book of hers at the store that I haven't read. So I grabbed this, and immediately when I started reading it, I realized it was going to be different than her other books that I've read. First of all of the books of hers that I've read so far have been in free verse poetry. And parts of this book were written in free verse poetry, but then other parts were written more like a narrative poem. So it feels closer to a narration than to poetry, but it was still poetic in nature. So it just had a different feel to it. There is also second person narration. This book has multiple POV characters, and in between there's some narration in between each one. This whole story is a conversation between you, the reader, and violence, like actual violence. It's like personified. And then, like I said, there are multiple POV characters. There are 6 different points of view. You have 3 guys and 3 girls. The guys are Rand, Silas, and Daniel. And then the girls are Noelle, Cami, and Ashlyn. And so because there are so many POV characters, and this is not a particularly long book, it's like a little over 400 pages, you really only get each POV character like 5 times, I think it was. So you don't have a lot of time to really get to know each individual character. This whole book takes place over the span of like a weekend. There were a lot of connections between characters. So much so that I had to write some of them down. So I'm going to read you my notes that I wrote down, because it was hard for me to keep track, especially at the beginning of the book, to keep track how people were connected to other people in the story. So this is what I had written down. Silas beats up Daniel. Silas stalks Grace. Grace is dating Daniel. Rand and Grace are step-siblings. Rand is married to Cami. Cami and Noelle are siblings. Noelle was best friends with Grace. Cami is now friends with Grace. Cami deals weed to Silas. Silas is dating Ashlyn, but remember he's stalking Grace. And Ashlyn is cousins to Tim, and Tim and Silas are best friends. And Daniel and Tim are half-brothers. So like, seriously, you find out all this information fairly early on, so that's why I didn't say this was like a spoiler. Like, Ellen Hopkins throws a lot of information at you, and I had to write it down or I was lost. I couldn't remember all of the connections. So, warning on that. But basically, what I figured out pretty early on is that this girl, Grace, who is not a POV character, Grace is at the center of pretty much everyone. She is somehow tied to every single POV character. And before we go any further in this video, I do want to give a trigger warning. For lack of a better term, I have to say trigger warning. This is about gun violence. This book talks a lot about gun violence and suicide and murder, and it might be triggering for people. And I want to give another trigger warning because there is a graphic sexual assault scene, and it is of a minor, and it was very hard for me to read, and I know it will be hard for many people to read. So be warned before you pick this up. I picked this up because I love Ellen Hopkins. I am a gun owner. I hunt. I am of the firm belief that gun safety should be taught to everyone in school. And I have 2 examples of why I believe this. Because you could come across a gun at some point unexpectedly in your life and it's happened to me twice. And you need to be able to know how to handle that gun safely. Even if you never, ever, ever shoot a gun, if you never, ever go hunting, you should know how to safely disarm a gun, how to check if a gun is loaded. You should know that. That is my firm belief. Because twice I have come across guns that were not mine, and I have had to check and make sure that they weren't loaded. One of them was not. One of them was. And so I did have to unload it then. So for real, it is so important. I think everyone should know gun safety. That is my little public safety announcement. I am a hunter, like I said. I am okay with stricter gun laws. So I kind of fall in the middle of the two extremes. So that is part of the reason why I picked this book up. I wanted to see what another person has to say about it. So if you disagree with me on guns, that's fine. This is a book channel, so I would appreciate any comments to be about this book. Let's discuss this book. So let's get back to the book. This book is a conversation with violence, and violence likes to use guns. And violence tells you at the beginning of the book that someone we've met will pull the trigger by the end of the book. And you have to figure out who it's going to be. It also tells you that someone we've met is going to be the victim. And so the entire time reading this book, I was trying to figure out, okay, there are multiple people that have reasons to pull the trigger. Who's it going to be? And who's going to be the one that's hurt? It's definitely a very interesting setup for a book. There are a lot of broken families in this book, and there are a lot of dead parents in this book. Like, I kind of took issue with that because, I mean, I come from a broken family, but I just think that, like, having the majority of the characters come from some kind of a broken home was a little cliche. I know there's like stereotypes that people that have issues with violence, they come from a broken home, and that's not always the case. So I did kind of take issue with that a little bit. So one critique there. Another critique I had of this book is that Noelle has epilepsy, and the way that she talks about her epilepsy, and she deals with body weight issues, the way she talks about herself, I took issue to, because people might read that and take offense because she body shames herself and she refers to her brain as dysfunctioning. And I didn't like that. And I understand that it's the way her character feels about it and not actually the way that Ellen Hopkins feels about those issues. But it's still just, it was a little too much. Like, I didn't like it. I tried to write it off as like, Noelle's parents are super overprotective of her because of her epilepsy, so maybe that makes her feel like she can't do things. So maybe that's why she keeps referring to herself as like malfunctioning. And her parents also like body shame her, so like I get that maybe she's internalizing that, but I just didn't really like those bits of conversation because it just didn't feel good to read, I guess. One thing I did like about this book is that because there are so many POV characters, you get multiple perspectives of things, and you don't really know what the truth is, which that happens in real life. Like, you'll hear different sides of a story, and you have to decide which one's true and which one you're going to believe, because there's no way for you to actually know unless you were there. Somebody's lying, and you may never figure out who's lying. And so I really liked that. There's one thing, I'm not going to go too deep into it, but there's an issue between Daniel and Tim, and that was like one thing that I was like, oh my gosh, I thought one person was telling the truth at first, and then by the end I thought the other one was telling the truth. And so it was like, you never really find out what the truth is, so you just have to make up your own mind, and I thought that was written really well. Now, I want to talk about the ending. So this is a spoiler alert because I am going to spoil the ending. I will, because I just need to talk about it. So, spoiler alert here. Like I said, violence tells you that someone's going to pull the trigger. And when I first read that at the beginning of the book, I assumed that it was going to be a POV character that will pull the trigger. I was wrong. And I had to go back and look at how it was worded. Violence says, someone we've met. And you meet, in the first few pages, you meet a little boy named Waylon. He is like 2 or 3 years old. I can't remember exactly off the top of my head. But he's a child. And he gets a hold of a gun at the end and accidentally kills somebody with it. And I did not expect that because the entire book I was thinking it was going to be one of the POV characters. And so reading about a child shooting somebody broke my heart. When I got to that part and I saw that he was the one that was getting the gun, I thought he was going to shoot himself, first of all. So thank you, Ellen Hopkins, for not having the baby shoot themselves because, oh my gosh, especially as a mother with children that age, I would have lost it. I just would have. It's still extremely sad. The person that gets shot ended up being the person I thought was going to be shot. It was Grace. Grace was at the center of everyone. I just had a feeling it was going to be her that got shot. And Waylon accidentally shoots Grace. It is very, very hard to read that scene. And so, yeah, I just had to talk about it. Sorry to spoil the ending, but if you're watching this part of the video, you knew I was going to, so that's on you. I warned you. It was very, very hard to read. But I think that's just a testament to how good of a writer Ellen Hopkins is. And it made me feel things. And not just one thing. Like, I was angry, I was upset, I was sad. Like, it was a mixture of emotions. And I think that's what she was going for. It wasn't just one emotion I was feeling when I read that scene. This book is obviously a commentary on gun violence and gun safety. So I did enjoy reading the book. Enjoy sounds like a really bad word to use. It's not a new favorite of mine because it did have some issues, but I think it was very well crafted, and I think it does open up discussion on a very important issue. One last comment, this is kind of random, but I just have to mention this because I know Ellen Hopkins did this on purpose, but the last page here, if you get rid of the title and you turn this on its side, it looks like a gun. It looks like an automatic rifle. It just does. I know she did that on purpose. And I just wanted to point it out because I didn't know if everyone would notice that. Like, I noticed it. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe she didn't mean to do that. But that's what I thought of when I read that last page. If you've read this book, let me know your thoughts in the comments. And let's keep it about the book. I would prefer to keep it about the book because this is a book channel. So let's talk about this work. I know that this is a heated issue, and I don't want it to get heated in my comments if I can help it. So I appreciate you being respectful of other people's opinions. And if anyone has lost someone to gun violence, my heart goes out to you, and I am truly, truly sorry. That's all for me this week. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel, and I will talk to you next Monday. Thanks for talking books with me.